I guess now I can make a bit of breaking news because I left the White House to come here to do this interview with you. And before I did, we actually referred this particular case to the Department of Justice for a full criminal investigation.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. That was Vice President J.D. Vance breaking the news that he just referred Governor Tim Walz, Keith Ellison, and a whole bunch of Democrats in Minnesota over to the DOJ for criminal investigation, all because they allowed fraud to run wild throughout Minnesota. And we're now seeing this because the House Oversight Committee just released a report detailing exactly what was happening throughout the state. And in that report, it actually suggested that Tim Walz hired private investigators to retaliate against the whistleblowers who were trying to expose all the fraud that was happening. You just cannot make this stuff up. Let us get into it by taking a look at this video of J.D. Vance announcing that he actually referred these individuals throughout Minnesota for criminal investigation. Play clip.
I guess now I can make a bit of breaking news because I left the White House to come here to do this interview with you. And before I did, we actually referred this particular case to the Department of Justice for a full criminal investigation. We are not going to do what the Biden administration did and make judgments of the law before all the facts are in. But here's what's particularly troubling about this to me is Jesse, you had people within Governor Walz's office who were saying, you know what, this looks like fraud. It looks like these Somalian illegal immigrants are doing something that's very shady. And then you had people who shut them down, who shut these whistleblowers down and said, you know, you're a racist or you're a xenophobe for asking questions about where taxpayer money is going. What that means to me, Jesse, is that clearly people weren't taking fraud seriously. Whether it rises to the level of a criminal violation, we're going to investigate it. And of course, if it does rise to that level, we're going to prosecute it. We have to.
That was Vice President J.D. Vance making it clear that they will investigate and they will prosecute if they find any sign of wrongdoing in terms of fraud. And it's about time because it's been a couple of months. It's been over 6 months since we have learned about that all the fraud that's taking place in Minnesota. And we really haven't seen any prosecution in terms of the government officials who's involved with this entire thing. Sure, we have seen Somali daycare owners being prosecuted, but when it comes to the government officials who have overseen this entire thing to allow all this fraud to take place, we haven't seen any investigation or any prosecution. So it's about time. And here we have a tweet by Vice President J.D. Vance where he stated, I've referred these allegations to DOJ's new fraud division for criminal investigation. Minnesota state officials are not above the law, and if they facilitated fraud, lied under oath about what they knew, or harassed and intimidated whistleblowers, they must face justice. And this is the letter that Vice President J.D. Vance sent over to the Department of Justice referring Keith Ellison and Tim Walz over for criminal investigation. And what he's talking about here, Vice President J.D. Vance, because the Vice President mentioned a lot of things, right? He's saying if they facilitated fraud, if they lied under oath, or if they harassed or intimidated whistleblowers, right? What he's talking about is because the House Oversight Committee released a report detailing exactly that, exactly what was happening in Minnesota in regards to the fraud. Watch this reporting. Play clip.
John, good evening. It's a damning report. It goes after Democratic Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and Attorney General Keith Ellison. The committee says the duo failed to stop fraud. That's because they were concerned about being accused of racism.
Apparently, you can only commit welfare fraud if you're white.
House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer claims that the political Minnesota twins conveniently looked the other way.
Tim Walz and Keith Ellison knew that the beneficiaries of this particular fraud were the Somalis in Minnesota. There's a massive voting bloc for the Democrat Party to keep Minnesota blue, and they didn't want to do anything to rock the boat.
The report says state employees flagging the fraud faced retaliation and intimidation.
That was a reporting on the report that the House Oversight Committee released that detailed exactly what was going on in Minnesota. That Governor Tim Walz, Keith Ellison, and all the Democrats in Minnesota, they knew exactly what was going on, and none of them did anything to stop the fraud. And remember, if President Trump wasn't elected, we wouldn't have found out about this fraud. Because remember, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz was running for president and vice president. And Tim Walz is from Minnesota. So if they had won that election, we wouldn't have found out about any of this fraud. And what is crazy is that after whistleblowers started coming forward, telling their stories on exactly what is going on in regards to this fraud, Tim Walz and his government, they try to essentially silence these whistleblowers. And the length that they went through to silence these whistleblowers is just mind-boggling. Play this clip.
Whistleblowers at Minnesota DHS claim that Walz targeted them by spending millions on surveilling staff and hiring private investigators or law firms to silence staffers who were reporting that this was all being scammed. Claiming DHS investigators took photos of their cars, homes, monitored their computers and phones, sought to gain personal information about which schools their kids attended, like the mob. They also alleged that DHS would refuse promotion opportunities to anybody that reported this fraud, which just makes this story even crazier. House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer joins us now with more on this. I can't believe that this is a real story, that they knew about it, they looked the other way, and then they're threatening people that are reporting it.
Based on the content of that report that the Oversight Committee released, that Governor Tim Walz and his government, what they did, they retaliated against whistleblowers. They hired private investigators. They hired lawyers to threaten these people. This is blatant government corruption at its finest. These are things that you'll typically see in a third world country. And at this point, Minnesota, I'll classify as such, because what's going on over there in regards to the fraud, in regards to the state being taken over, then I would liken it to somewhere like Somalia or somewhere over there. But here we have James Comer detailing the crimes that you may see Tim Walz being charged with. Play clip.
Yeah, two crimes here, Rob. First of all, they turned a blind eye. The whistleblowers, who are all career state employees in Minnesota, they did everything right. They administered the tax dollars. These were federal funds that came to the states, and the states administered them. They saw fraud time after time. They did what they were supposed to do. They reported it to the superiors. They reported it to both Governor Walz and Attorney General Ellison. And every single time, they turned a blind eye. And the second crime is they retaliated against the whistleblowers. When more and more whistleblowers came forward, this was not the narrative that Tim Walz wanted. They didn't want to do anything to offend that massive Somali voting bloc, which were the primary culprits of the fraud. So they went to great lengths to try to intimidate the whistleblowers. And that is against the law. We believe firmly in the House Oversight Committee in whistleblowers. That is how we conduct investigations. We don't have a lot of the same tools that the Department of Justice has. We have to rely on good, honest whistleblowers.
That was James Comer, the chair of the House Oversight Committee, and here he's detailing what crimes Tim Walz has committed. And for one, he knew about the fraud, his office knew about the fraud, and they disregarded that fraud. That is a crime. And the second thing is, when whistleblowers started speaking up, what they did, they retaliated against these whistleblowers, which is a complete crime in itself. And it's about time that we start seeing accountability in regards to these people facing justice, from Ilhan Omar down to Keith Ellison, the Attorney General of Minnesota, down to Tim Walz. All these folks need to face justice. And you know, it wouldn't be a story unless we talked about Timu Obama, also known as Hakeem Jeffries, because he was asked about this, and his response will shock you, will shock most of you, but it may not, because he was asked about this situation regarding Tim Walz, because Hakeem Jeffries, he's the leader of the Democrats in the House. So he's being asked about everything. And he proceeded to blame President Trump, which is not surprising to me, but it may be a surprise to a lot of you guys. But watch this clip.
House Republicans on the Oversight Committee have released this report on fraud in Minnesota, targeting Tim Walz, targeting Keith Ellison. Do you think that this is just about trying to get at those two figures, or do you think that there's actually something that Ellison and Walz have to say for themselves?
House Republicans are not serious about rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse in the United States of America. You know why? Because the biggest fraud being perpetrated on the people of this country right now is coming out of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
So Timu Obama, Hakeem Jeffries, was asked about all the fraud and the report that just came out of the House. And he proceeded to blame President Trump. He mentioned 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, which is the White House. It's the address for the White House. So basically, he's just saying, well, you know, yeah, Democrats, we are messed up. We have a lot going on. But you know what we're going to do? We're going to blame President Trump for everything. We're not going to take accountability. That is Hakeem Jeffries for you. And that brings us to the end of this video. Please let me know what you think in the comment section below in regards to this whole Tim Walz situation. Also, please consider liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. And I'll see you in the next one.